Welcome to the worst nightmare of all. Reality.
Explore the lesser-known stories of our unknown world. Join the pursuit of the paranormal with Ash and Greg.
Thanks for joining us on this episode where we're going to talk about the Stardust Ranch in Arizona. So what I'll do is I'll just start with the history of the ranch, and then we'll let the man himself tell us in his own words. So we're fortunate enough today to have John Edmonds, the owner of the Stardust Ranch in Arizona, joining us. And they will be joining us a little bit later on in the podcast, where we will be talking to him about all things alien and paranormal. So I'll just talk about how we get up to now. So the ranch is based, as mentioned, in Arizona. John and his wife run a sanctuary for animals, and they take in stray horses and all types of unwanted cattle, etc., and look after them in the ranch. So on the day of move-in, John and his wife turn up at the ranch. So John's walking around and he sees this guy walking towards him, and he walks up to him, and he's a vagrant-looking guy. He's got a ponytail, whatnot, and he's got a machete with him. And John's like, "Who are you?" He goes, "Oh, I live here." And John's like, "I've just bought the ranch. I can't have you living here." And the vagrant guy goes, "I work on the property." John again is like, "Well, I've just bought the ranch. I don't need any help. What do you do?" And this vagrant guy looks him in the eye and says, "I kill the monsters." So John, what do you even say to that? So John's a bit taken back by that and says, "Look, I don't know what's going on, but I don't need your help. Just get your stuff and go." The guy walks off. That's the last we hear of him. There's no story. After that encounter, John's a bit taken back and thinks nothing of it. And they just start getting on with their life, and things are all good. Then the weirdness starts. I won't go into too much detail because John does start talking about it when we interview him. But just to give sort of a top level of what he does talk about, his wife gets abducted on a nightly basis by these grey aliens. He has AK-47 shootouts in the back garden firing at alien spacecraft. He decides that machine guns do not work when trying to kill these grey aliens, so he takes to a samurai sword. He then proceeds to start killing these things. He can preempt the movement of the aliens, and even manages to take a sample of the dead alien off the samurai sword, keeps one in his freezer, and sends it off for analysis. Again, I'll let John talk about that when we get to it. But this ranch is proper strange. Ghost Adventures have been there. They've done an investigation. There's a special of it on YouTube and all the various viewing platforms. So there's definite interest in this guy and in the ranch. So we were fortunate enough to speak to John. The interview's coming up now, where he talks a little bit more about what's going on at the ranch now and some of the stories that you won't have heard him talk about before. I found it fascinating. I know you did as well, Ash.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, and this guy, if everything he says is true, this guy has had the most insane experience that I don't think will ever be repeated. Skinwalker Ranch.
Definitely.
Skinwalker Ranch is no comparison to Stardust Ranch. Stardust Ranch is like Skinwalker Ranch on acid. And as John mentions, it's like a one-stop shop of everything paranormal. So for the next sort of hour, we talk to John, and it's up to you guys to make up your own minds as to what's happened and if you believe him. As you'll see, John is quite adamant that he doesn't care if people don't believe him. He knows what happened and is happening on the ranch. So we'll hand over and would appreciate your thoughts on what you think has gone on. I think the encounters you've had and everything that's happened to you since buying the ranch, it's just been mind-blowing in terms of just like completely different to some of the other sort of UFO and paranormal experiences that a
Well,
lot
Craig,
of
I tell everybody this is like one-stop shopping as
Yeah.
far as the paranormal goes, and I over the years, I went through a lot of different stages, almost like, going through grief,
Yeah.
because, I had to learn how to accept it, deal with it, and then see it in perspective. And eventually I've gotten to the point now where I see the whole thing as an educational process
Yeah.
to become somebody to, do bigger things in the world. I mean, I've always, I became a social worker and a psychiatric therapist, educationally, with the idea that I wanted to help people and do good in the world. And this ranch has really become sort of the hands-on experience for, having to even take it to a larger level.
So how do you come to accept what's happening? Because you mentioned that you've come to accept it. How does one go about accepting the phenomenal stuff that's been happening to you and your wife and the ranch?
Well, I've had to see it in a bigger perspective. When I first, decided to buy this ranch, I bought it. I saved up from the time I was, 7 or 8 years old on to buy a ranch out west. Me growing up in Chicago and, the middle part of the country, I had always wanted to have horses, and I'd always wanted to live sort of the, cowboy lifestyle, that we grew up, seeing back in the 50s and 60s, And so finally, when I got my chance to do it, I jumped on it and did it. And then when I found out that I bought the ranch from hell, I was just like, oh my God, what have I done? I mean, this is not the dream that I signed on for. This is like the science fiction, crazy dream. And I don't want this, can I give it back? Let me trade it in for bonanza or something, but it didn't work out that way. It was like, hey, you know what? Finders keepers, buddy. You bought it, it's yours. And I had to literally, get over my anger about that. I had a lot of anger, rage about it. And, these little grays showing up and hurting my animals and, coming after me and coming after my wife. I was furious for years. I was just absolutely in a major state of rage. And all I wanted to do was kill as many of them as possible.
Yeah.
And so I did, I mean, they came and they created, trouble, and I took it out on them directly.
So how many grays do you think you've killed over the years?
19 pretty much for sure. Maybe a few more. I mean, I really don't know. It's not like, it's not like a batting average. I'm not, it's just one of those things, it's not football. I just, all I've done is defend my property, defend my family, and defend myself. And, they just kept coming. And, finally, we were fortunate enough to have somebody that was able to introduce us to some other species. Arizona is full of ETs. And everything I say, I can't really document it. It's not like I have, postcards with me with a bunch of ETs on them or something. But, we were fortunate enough to get introduced to a few different species, and it was through a mutual trust arrangement with other individuals that they knew, and they trusted that person, and that person introduced me. And ever since then, we've had, every couple of years, we've kind of had one or two meetings and sat down and discussed things and, gone over things. And they've told me their points of view on a few things, and I've told them mine. And it's been good. I mean, I've learned so much over the last few years, and it's why I tell people that there's nothing on this planet that we can't solve if we take responsibility for it. There's no country on earth that we can't work with the people themselves. I don't give a damn about the governments. The governments are on their own, but we can work with the people to create solutions. And there's nothing that we can't do if we work together. And there's such a standard of living that just needs to be achieved universally. Everybody needs to be able to have options for good housing, clean, healthy food and water, safety, and a chance to make something out of their lives that's significant and something that is beneficial. Something they can be proud of. Have a good reason for being alive, other than just take up space. We can do all that right now. We can do every bit of that right now. I've set up a trust fund, literally, and mostly so far it's just little bits of money that I've thrown in it. But the idea is to create teams of people to start working on some of these world problems, because we have the answers. I have the answers. And it's not about me. Believe me, I'm not interested in fame. I'm not interested in fortune. I'm not interested in any of that. I'm interested in creating a better world. And we can do it. Cool.
I do completely agree with you. Just going back to where you talked about the different races. You said you were introduced to those races by people. Were they humans that have introduced you to those races?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been a little bit of both. The Greys, as far as I'm concerned, are like the bad guys, the gang members, whatever you want to call them. They're absolutely of no use. At least I haven't met any that were okay under any circumstances. We have met a lot of Pleiadians over the years, some that I've known for over 20 years, and they're phenomenal individuals. They have phenomenal abilities. They're incredibly intelligent, but they're very careful about who they associate with because of the fact that there's such a stigma that goes with being from an off-world, existence. And there are so many races that have lived here for thousands of years. I mean, it's not like these are coming in by spaceship and just visiting. I mean, I'm sure that happens too, but they've been here. They're as much part of this world and, almost at this point, just human as anybody else.
So what kind of intelligent communication have you had with them? Do they?
I've sat down with them for hours at a time. I mean, many hours, they come and go. We've done, in some cases, we've taken trips and gone places and done things. Okay. So they're, I mean, you can't tell the difference between them and anybody else, really. The only reason that they're not human is because if they confide in you and they tell you, they will do things to demonstrate to you abilities that we don't have.
What kind of abilities do they show you?
In some cases that I've seen personally, under one particular set of circumstances, great strength, physical strength. An individual that was in Earth years, over 70 years old. We were in a rock climbing situation in the Grand Canyon, and we had a mishap. And that one person raised like 8 of us on a rope with one arm and one hand, while holding onto the other end and skinnying up the rope, dragging us with him.
Oh, wow. So do they communicate with you like a human would?
Oh, absolutely.
Just like talking?
One of the ones that I know personally is a great musician. And I mean, he, plays guitar and sings and does everything. And people don't understand. They're embedded in our culture. There are plenty of ETs that are already in our culture that we see and know because they're famous. And people don't even understand that. They don't know it. And of course, they're not going to admit to it. And I'm certainly not going to out anybody.
No, I understand that.
So these Palladians, they're just everyday people in the streets that we walk past, could be one of these from this race.
Some of them have a tendency to be very tall, be very good looking. They all look like they should be, professional models. They should be, TV or movie stars, things like that. They're exceptional looking in the fact that you look at them and you go, well, that person doesn't really look like anybody I know, but at the same time, they look like they should be, doing something, on camera. I mean, they have a unique, the way they present. They're striking.
Yeah, that wasn't what I was expecting you to say they would be like, to be fair. So that's interesting that we potentially interact with these races without even knowing about them.
And see, some of them actually, the ones that are what I call newcomers, they don't understand the culture particularly well, but they're a bit arrogant, and so they cover it by trying to act like they're kind of stuck up, and those are the ones that don't have much of a sense of humor. They're particularly fun to be around because they don't get it. and it's kind of funny. I mean, you could say stuff and they just look at you and you think they're offended. They don't even know what you're talking about.
Oh, wow.
Because they don't understand the cultural references. And they can get, kind of pissy about
it. So you're talking about the Greys, and the Greys, I know from the bits that I've heard you talk about previously, that they're quite aggressive and they're not a very nice race. And now you've talked about the ones that are sort of more normal. I say normal, but more friendly and interact more. You say that they are as human, like, really.
They are, but they still have a lot of connections. I mean, they typically have not only connections off world, but they have access to a great deal of information. I mean, they're fascinating. The ones that I've met anyway, because I can literally sit down and talk to them for days at a time. They can answer almost anything. They're extremely truthful people. It's like they don't even understand what lying is. They are exactly who they present as they are. So they're not out to try to make an impression. They're not out to impress you. They're already pretty impressive people. So they're what we consider to be educated, they consider to be, sort of like almost like hillbillies.
Okay.
I mean, they're terribly, terribly smart, and they're light years ahead of us a lot of times in terms of their understanding of hard sciences, and also history. So it's like, they go back. I mean, some of these guys live 500-600 years or more.
Okay, so
so they can go back and say, I remember so and so, and they're not kidding around. I mean, they actually were there.
So they a lot of stuff has been coming out over the last couple of years with the Tic Tac UFO, and a lot more public awareness and maybe acceptance of the fact that disclosure's coming. What are your thoughts on disclosure, and also what are the thoughts of the alien races? What do they think of disclosure?
I don't think we're going to get any kind of disclosure that is particularly significant. We're going to get, and I'll tell you why I say that. Because the governments of the world have been involved in cover-ups. They've been involved in espionage. They've been involved in all sorts of, bad stuff. And for them to come out and say, we've known about this for, like the last 200 years, and we've been involved in it, and we've done this and we've done that. They're not going to say that. They're not going to do anything that implicates them in a position where the average citizen says, wow, my government sucks. Look what they've been doing. And what this is what they've kept us from being able to understand and have access to. And they've been making deals behind, our backs, allegedly on our behalf, but what have they been getting for it? They've been getting access to, science, and they've been getting access to weapons, and they've been getting access to little bits of pieces of technology. Well, you know what? They could have had access to an awful lot more stuff, and they could have passed that information along to us so that we could have been partners at the same big table, so that we could have taken that information and done things with it to make the world a better place. And they assumed that they had the right to make all those decisions on our behalf. I don't think they did. Until we can get to a point where we can have some kind of understanding with our governments, where we can say, look, you guys need to, stop treating us like children and start treating us like adults. We're ready to consume the information for what it is directly. And we want to be part of the situation so that we can work with it. Until we get that kind of respect, we're never going to get disclosure. What we're going to get is some postcard version where they tell us stuff to impress us and shock us and scare us and all the rest of it. You know what? That doesn't help us to get down the road anywhere positive. It just keeps us, under their thumb. I don't want to be under anybody's thumb, and I don't want anybody else on this planet to have to be under anybody's thumb. I want us all to be equals and to sit at the same table, know the same information, and make informed, educated decisions.
Do you think the alien races will force disclosure if the governments don't? Or do you think that's not their agenda?
Well, realize something, we have to be careful when we refer to them as aliens, because, that's like calling humans all, one group. Okay. And there's, as many different versions of humans and different beliefs and different, agendas and all the rest of that. And it's the same thing with the various different ET races. And that is that there's lots of different agendas. There's lots of different levels of commitment and participation, from people that could care less and all they want to do is just live out their lives to, people that are frontline, ready to, jump in and do something. And they have the same arrangement. So, you have to be kind of specific.
So, okay. I completely understand. With the ranch itself, what do you think the agenda is with the ranch? Because obviously there's a lot happening there that doesn't appear to happen. I know it does appear at other places, but why do you think the ranch was particularly picked?
Well, I think it was picked a long time ago, and I just happened to stumble across it. I don't think it particularly had anything to do with me. I think I was just the unfortunate soul that kind of bought the wrong ranch. But we've been told that this ranch has had 2 portals on it for as long as 8,000 years. And so many different cultures have come and gone. Certainly as we've been, working to do construction and things here on the ranch at various times, we've found artifacts, we've found all sorts of things that prove that. So definitely this place has a much longer history than when the buildings were built. The land itself was here forever and various different things were happening here. It's just that probably for the most of it, there wasn't any settlement here to be able to, actually make any record of it or to participate directly. And, when we got here, it just started acting up, just crazy the way things have been here. Never would have expected anything like it. In fact, I wouldn't even have believed it. If I had heard my stories, and not been me, I probably wouldn't have believed them. But, all I can do is say what it is. I've had, multiple lie detector tests. My wife worked for the FBI for years. I worked, with county, state, and federal government. We're pretty good examples of people that, manage to, go through the litmus of all the different, qualifiers to become, legitimate, trusted members of society. And, here we are. We're the guys living on the alien ranch. So I don't know. I always tell people, they say, oh, come on, it's a big story. And I go, no, it is a big story, but it's a big truth, and, we're not out there trying to make money off this. Anything that we do, we're not doing for us. We're trying to do to make the world a better place. We run an animal charity to, help all the abandoned animals. We spend the majority of money that comes our way. That's where it goes. My wife works 2 jobs and I work, 2 or 3 jobs, in order to pay for everything here. And, we're not doing it because of the fact that we want people to pat us on the back and tell us how wonderful we are. We don't care about that. We care about the animals having a loving, safe environment with us, when nobody else wanted them. And you see, that's the difference between us and a lot of these guys that are out there on the paranormal circus is what I call it. They're all out there rehashing stuff that's been going on for the last 70 years and trying to put it in different terms and write it down in new books and present it over and over and over again. They make their way on all the TV shows and all the rest of that stuff. And I guess they get paid pretty well for it. More power to them. But we don't do that. We're not out there, trying to hawk alien dolls or anything else. I mean, I wrote a book, and it's out there, but it's a book about what happened here, and that's it.
That's a great point. Just going back to your ranch, there's quite a lot of properties that are around Stardust Ranch. Do any of them, or do you know, like, if you've spoken to them, anything that they say that's happened, like, on their ranches, or is it just more centered around Stardust?
We have had, in the last couple of years, since we did the Ghost Adventures TV show a couple of years back, we've had a lot of people, come forward and literally as we're leaving the property, they'll pull over and, kind of stop their car in front of ours, and we don't much have a choice except to greet them and talk to them. And, they'll come out and say, hey, we own this property, down the road over here someplace, and we've seen all the same stuff, and our families have been seeing this stuff for 30 or 40 years. And I'm like, well, more power to you. Sorry that you had to go through that, but thanks for, confirming what we know. If there's anything we can do to help you or answer any questions to make your life easier, we'll be happy to do that. So yeah, we've met people, what I call the newcomers, the people that, heard about the story and decided to, buy a house right around us. So I'd say could kind of enjoy the sideshow. There's a lot of them that are totally pissed off at us because once they got out here, they either saw something or didn't see something. And if they saw something, generally it was something horrifying, and it made them just, like, my God, it's true. Why did we ever come out here? We hate you. Like that's my fault. And then we've got some that moves out here and, they haven't seen anything and they're like, oh, it's, a bunch of crap. And I'm like, no, it isn't, but that's okay. So, be glad that your life isn't being impacted by this stuff the same way ours is. So, we get a little bit of everything, and then we get sort of weird stuff where, we'll get a bunch of guys that just signed up to go overseas as soldiers, and they all want Stardust Ranch tattoos, or they they want to lift a beer and come out and they bring beer out and they stand outside the ranch and get drunk and scream and holler and do all their crazy stuff. So we get everything. I mean, it's just we had no idea that when we started doing shows, or I started doing shows, that we were going to have some of the reactions we've had, because, we get movie stars that come out, we get, musicians, we get people from all around the world that come out here. Literally from every corner of the earth, we get phone calls and we get people coming out here. I change my phone number 4 and 5 times a year because it just gets to the point where it's too much. I get 400 emails a day. Facebook is just, I've got thousands of followers on Facebook, plus, every day I get, 50 to 100 new people trying to sign up. So, I didn't ask for any of this. I'm not looking for that kind of recognition. My mission in life, take the information I've been given, turn it into new technology, and turn it into working examples of things that can make the world a better place. And I'm not trying to piss off governments or anything else. We're not trying to start a revolution or anything. What we're trying to do is create an opportunity for people to make good, well-informed choices and make their lives a better place, and ask them to share that information with others. That's how we change the world.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. And I do appreciate the fact that, from what I've seen, you don't publicly try and push the narrative of what's going on Stardust Ranch, like you mentioned other people do. So that certainly lends credibility to everything that you're talking about as well, which is not a bad thing. So I think that's what's captivated me about the story over the years that I've been interested in the ranch, is the fact that it isn't something that's necessarily a talked about subject. Like there are other places, certainly in the US, where there's a lot of media interest and such.
Well,
like
they've
lots
got Skinwalker, everybody's all crazy about Skinwalker Ranch, and the guy that owned it, Robert Bigelow, he sent his teams here and they interviewed us for a week, reenacted, a lot of the fights that we had with the Greys physically, filmed it. They wanted to dig the place up horribly. I mean, I was like, no, you can't dig the place up. They wanted to buy the place. Everything that happened at Skinwalker pretty much happened here.
Yeah.
About 10 years before it ever happened at Skinwalker. And it's as if somebody took all of the information and put it into a database about Stardust Ranch and then created a scripted version and did Skinwalker. And you know what? That's fine. I couldn't care less personally. I mean, it's like I said, it's not about it's not a competition to see, who can have the worst ranch. It's just, it is what it is. We are our ranch, Skinwalker, and there's one other one. I can never remember the name of it. They're all in alignment geographically. You can literally follow the ley lines or whatever they call them, and they all go right through each other. We're the lowest one on the totem pole south, and then it goes up from there up to Utah.
So I've seen on your social media the portals that you've taken photos of.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe some of the craft or beings or what's come through those portals that you've witnessed?
Well, what I would do is this: I would tell you the portals are the portals, and the other phenomena that has happened on the ranch is not necessarily portal related.
Okay.
They're different. In other words, like when we had been in this ranch about a year and a half, and my wife and I saw what looked like Roman centurion soldiers walk directly during a power failure when there was no power. We were just sitting on the sofa watching a movie, and all of a sudden the lights went out, all the power went out. Next thing, it was like somebody turned on a black and white old movie projector, and they were portraying this pair of centurions walking from one corner of the house through to the other end of the house, and they just disappeared out the living room wall right in front of us. They just walk right through it and disappear. It was like somebody turned off the projector. So,
how do you react to something like that?
Pardon me?
How do you react to something like that? Because that's not even just.
Typically, we were just mouths hanging open and going, "Oh my God, did you see that? Oh yeah, I saw that. What the heck was that?" I mean, we're normal people. It's not like we're, sophisticated snobs where, I do suppose we just had a phenomena, I mean, we're just, we're just people. And, imagine the average person going through all this stuff. That's kind of how it was.
I can't even begin to imagine what that was like for you. Now, we me and Ash have been talking over podcasts and to people that we talk to about the connection between, I say aliens, but the UFO phenomena, alien phenomena, and the paranormal, and the link between the two. And people do talk that they're seeing paranormal events taking place where there's cryptids being seen, there's alien or UFO or unidentified aerial phenomena happening. Do you see a link between all of the phenomena?
Yes. Yeah. The thing about it is that we seem to be, imagine an onion and imagine the various different layers of the onion being kind of like our realities. And for some reason, either, and I can't really put a message to it in terms of an explanation other than the fact that the layers are getting thinner and thinner, and the different levels of existence or dimensions seem to be interacting in such a way that all these things are now mixing together. And so, we have things happening out of order in terms of time. It's like time is things that have happened hundreds of years ago suddenly become noticeable in this time frame here and now. The various different UFOs that we keep seeing, we see ships on a regular basis. I'm sure some of it might be man-made, but I don't think most of it is. I don't think that the orbs that we've seen for 20, 25 years out here, that were recorded during the Phoenix Lights, March 13th of 97. I don't think that has anything to do with anything natural, man-made. We've seen black triangles that were, I'm convinced they were nothing man-made. The energy coming off of them, the effect that it has on the human body, I don't see that. I've seen some of the most advanced human craft ever made that used to be secret technology. Luke Air Force Base is only about 12, 15 miles away, and they have open houses every once in a while, and they let the public go through and actually walk right up to some of these types of craft. It was nothing compared to what we've seen.
So can you describe the ones that you've seen? What sort of form do they take?
Well, we had an example a number of years ago where we had some friends that were over, and we were out in the front of the ranch, standing around in the front corral with horses. And it was early evening, and suddenly we looked up, and you could see a very dense, absolutely black triangle object that was probably about a fourth to a third the size of the entire ranch. And it was about 200 to 300 feet over our head. And it just literally appeared out of nowhere. Suddenly it was just there. And the horses were real spooky, and they were, running around acting like they were afraid. There was a very weird energy that you could feel, kind of like a real strong bass guitar kind of thing, where your chest, like it interacts with you, and you can actually feel the energy, that kind of thing. It was just, you could see the sky around the outside of it, but for the most part, when you looked up, all you saw was triangle. And I didn't have a camera or a phone with me at the time. And, my friend told me, he says, look, I've got a phone, but it was one of those old flip phones, and he couldn't really record much with it. And he said, what do you want me to do? And I said, call 911. Let's see if we can get the sheriff to come out or something. And so he called, and, we reported what we saw, and a deputy came out in a patrol car, and the license plate was taped over, so you couldn't get the license plate number. The number on the vehicle was taped over so that you couldn't see what patrol car number it was. And the deputy that got out of the car had on a raincoat, and he had on a slicker over his hat, so you couldn't see his badge number or anything else. And it was not raining. It was, we're in the desert here. It rains like twice a year. And, and we tried to get him to identify himself, and he wouldn't do it. He just said, I'm here to take a report. And I said, well, good. I'm going to need a copy of that. And he wrote down a bunch of stuff. And at the end of it, even though he was standing right there looking at this craft with us, he wouldn't give us a copy of the report. He wouldn't tell us who he was. And he gave us no way to be able to identify or use him as a reference. And we ended up calling Peter Davenport from the UFO Reporting Center in Washington State, and literally talking to him on the phone as we're standing there underneath this object, and made a full report to him. And that was the best we could do.
Wow. That's some experience. Where do you think, or who do you think this police officer was?
Well, I imagine he was probably a Maricopa County deputy, but I know, because I used to belong to a health club here, a gym, and I'd see a lot of the deputies down at the gym, and, in the locker room and stuff, we would talk, kind of situation where off the record. And, I'd ask these guys, I'd say, do you see this kind of stuff out here on a regular basis? And he goes, man, we've been seeing this stuff for years. And I said, well, why don't you guys, get involved and try to get a handle on this? And he just looked at me and he said, we're absolutely sworn not to do anything with it. We're not even supposed to talk about it. And I was like, well, so is that coming down from somebody in the state, or is that coming down from the feds? He goes, as far as law enforcement goes, they try to avoid it the same way pilots avoid it, the way, anything to do with anything official that would legitimize it. Absolutely, pretty much unspoken, sworn, never to talk about it.
Well,
So is that the same reaction that you've had over the years, like in the past 20 plus years
Yes.
from law enforcement?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I worked in government. I mean, I got all the badges and everything. I mean, I could go, any federal building, any state building, any city of Phoenix building. I worked, in management. I worked in the front lines of dealing with people in the streets. I ran, big groups for counseling groups. I mean, I was way up there in the system. I wasn't like a little guy. And, everybody would talk about stuff, but they would never on the record ever go on the record and talk about it. I mean, when Fife Symington was the governor, he made total fun of it.
Yeah. When was the last time you had any interaction? Are you in regular contact with these different races? Has there been any recent experiences that you've had with them?
We have, let's put it this way. I've gotten to the point where I know certain individuals well enough that we speak regularly. And, so it's, I mean, I consider them to be friends at this point, some of them. They know that I hold their privacy, sacred. I treat them the same way I would treat like a client that I was doing counseling with. We just I don't give out their identity. But they're here. And I mean, like I said, Arizona's full of them. And there are many different races here. And they are, I don't know if the rest of the country's full of them, but I know Arizona's full of them. It's funny, some of them attend these conferences, all these paranormal conferences.
yeah.
They're there. They're actually there.
Oh, really?
It's remarkable. I mean, when I see them, they're happy to see me, and we usually go off someplace and sit down and catch up and have coffee or whatever and talk.
I guess a lot of skeptics will say, like, you've had this going on for years. Lots of these greys coming at you, you've had fights with, literally.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of skeptics say, "Where's the evidence? Have you ever set up cameras to record anything coming? What's the best that you've got?" I guess.
Well, you can go on our website, and see the DNA reports. I mean, that was done a number of years ago with Dr. Levengood, who mysteriously died right before we could go with a worldwide news conference and sit down and show everybody on camera the evidence. I know people say, "Oh, how convenient." Hey, you know what? I don't make it up. I just live it. But it was, we have DNA evidence. It's on our website. You can go to www.alienranch@weebly.com and you can see what we got. We get pictures of all sorts of stuff there. I mean, we got video, we got photographs. I'm trained to be a professional witness in the Superior Court of Arizona, and everything that I have done, I've done in such a way that it could be, I could actually, hold up my right hand and swear an oath and say, this is what has happened. This is what we've seen. And here's the evidence. Plus, like I said, we have physical evidence as well. There's a lot of people out there that don't want to believe for whatever reason. There's the cancel culture, right now with everybody saying, hey, if I say it didn't happen enough times, then it didn't happen. Well, hey, that's fine. See, we're not out here trying to prove anything. It's like, if you're ready to open your heart and understand this for what it is and believe and know that something good can come from it, great. If you just want to be a troll and complain and say it's, a bunch of BS, cool. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me one bit.
And I think that lends even more credibility to John. And I know that's one of the things that's certainly captivated me over the years, is the fact that you literally don't care if people believe you or not, which I think is great.
Care less if they think I'm crazy. If they think I'm crazy and that I'm just a shill, so be it.
And I know that it's absolutely sort of extraordinary, the events that have taken place to you at the ranch over the last couple of decades. So again, I don't even know how you would even come to get to any kind of acceptance. But I know that I've seen the picture of the samurai sword on the floor with the blood on it, and
Right.
I think that's where you got some of the DNA evidence from the samurai sword.
Let me explain that a little
Yeah.
bit. The evidence has come from the sword, but it has come from when I took the head off of one of these creatures. I didn't know what to do with it. I mean, what do you do with a dead alien? It's not like it's not like you can send it out to be stuffed and put it over your mantle. So I didn't have the foggiest clue what to do with it, and so I wrapped it up and I stuck it in the freezer. And I was fortunate enough that at the time I was doing radio, and so I was able to reach out to some people that had connections, and they were able to tell me exactly who to talk to. And Dr. Levengood's name kept coming up, and so they got me the phone number, and I called him, and I told him what happened, and I took photographs of it, and I sent it to him, and he was terribly excited. And he said, well, you got to get this thing to me somehow. And I'm like, well, I'm in Arizona and you're in Michigan, and I'm certainly not going to put a dead alien in the car and drive it there. And he said, well, chop it up and I'll tell you how to prepare it and, vivisect it and all that, and we'll go ahead and ship it. And I said, okay. So I ended up shipping it by FedEx, and it's probably the strangest thing FedEx has ever had. And, he got it in good condition, and, it was on dry ice and everything. And so he, did what he did. But see, that DNA was done under laboratory conditions in a professional lab, and it was sent out to many different universities, and they did not identify what it was. They just said, please tell us what you think of this sample. And, a year and a half later, I've got all these major universities, and some of them are really respected Ivy League universities, making appointments to come and, take us out to dinner and hear our story firsthand. And, so we did all that. So, everything that was done, it was done under the best of conditions. It's a very legitimate, sample.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for explaining that. I'd seen that you'd got DNA reports previously, so that's good for people listening that don't really know the story or the encounters you've had, just to clarify that for us. So that's great.
The most interesting thing about that was the fact that the DNA came back as not just like animal life. It came back as animal life, but also plant life. It had hemoglobin, but it also, had some of the traits and characteristics of plants, and they were mixed together. It was like in the same animal. And that's how they were able to determine that there was nothing like that on the planet that existed.
Yeah, that is super strange. That is super strange. In terms of the future and with the ranch, what do you see, or do you see that the communication and your interactions with these different races will continue? Have they sort of advised you with what their plans are for the future, or?
Well, I mean, what I see the ranch doing is the fact that the energy here is so strong. We've had people that have literally gotten off planes in wheelchairs that came out to visit the ranch, and the next thing you know, a week later, they were pushing their wheelchair to get back on the plane and picking it up and packing it up themselves. They literally, came unable to walk and then left walking. So the energy here is very positive, but it's just very powerful, and it's what you make of it. If you come here and you're really negative and skeptical and you've got an axe to grind, well, guess what? You're probably going to have a pretty scary experience here. If you come with a positive attitude and the idea that you want to do something good and understand something from a beneficial point of view, chances are you're going to have a great experience. But it totally depends on the people that come out here. And I explain that to people. If you're in a bad place, you don't want to come here. If you just had a death in your family, if you've had something terrible happened, if you're really, sort of in a depressed, ongoing, bad mood, this is not the place to be. So it's whatever you bring to the ranch is kind of what you get magnified back to you.
Do you think that the ranch feeds on people's emotions and their state of mind when they come?
It magnifies it.
Yeah.
It magnifies it. I don't know that it feeds on it. I know that like with me over the years, when I was, kind of going through my period of time here where I was just angry all the time and just, feeling very ferocious. It did more than take that energy and feed it back to me by, putting all these grays out here and, having them kind of do battle with me. They took it out on my wife. They took it out on the animals. It was an absolute war zone. It was just, horrible. So I think it's kind of like a big mirror, like a reflective mirror that amplifies, whatever you use, bring whatever image you shine in it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. We, as our podcast is about UFOs, alien, but also paranormal, do you think that spirits and the paranormal as a whole, do you think they are part of the sort of alien phenomena? I say alien, but alien phenomena as a whole. Do you think they are one and the same thing, or do you think spirits are the dead, or what do you think?
I think that what happens is that there's different dimensions, and I think what happens is that, normally speaking, normal everyday life is 3D here on Earth, and what happens is that when you die, you go 4D and maybe go further. And I think what happens is that there are certain places these portals open up, and it allows things to enter that are 4D, maybe 5D, maybe 6D. And so we have interactions. And so our experiences, for the most part, 50 to 100 years ago, they were pretty much strictly 3D. And, spiritually speaking, you had, people that would have, striking experiences. And so you only had a few of those kind of people. And because the communication system wasn't well developed, you only heard about them locally. I think now that because we have the internet and we have the ability to do research and we have the ability to be able to, kind of span the globe and be, world travelers, I think we're having a lot more different types of interaction, and a lot more just normal, regular people are starting to be exposed to this, and they're opening themselves up to some of it. And I think in some cases, because they're curious, that they're inviting some of these things to come in and deal with them directly that, in the past that never would have happened. And so, I tell people, you got to be really careful about what you want to ask for. I get people all the time that say, oh, I wish I had your life. It's so cool. And I go, no, it really isn't that cool. It's really a pain in the ass. You got to be really careful, because you can do stuff and not even know you're doing it and have terrible experiences, and you brought them on yourself, but you won't know that because nobody talks about any kind of protocols or rules or procedures or anything else about how to deal with all this stuff. We get people, tripping out all over the world, taking people on these little adventures and selling them for TV and things like that. Some of them are real, some of them are fake, but there's no real instructions to people about, how to deal with it. You go to somebody in a church and they say, oh, it's all devils, it's all Luciferian, it's all this, that, or the other. Well, I'm sure things cross over. I'm sure there's, gray areas, there's dark areas, there's light areas, there's all sorts of things. But, E.T. does not need, if he's, if E.T., whatever version you want to talk about, is, some kind of devil, then why in the hell did they need a spaceship? It just doesn't make any sense. There's so many contradictions, and there's so much at the common sense level that if you think about some of these things, you can answer your own questions. You don't need somebody like me even to answer them. It's just, we don't know a whole lot about this. If you went back 200 years, 300 years ago and brought some of the simplest technology there is and showed it to them, they'd be like, "Oh my God, you guys are devils. You're spirits. You're angels. You could be anything." And it's purely because of the cultural ignorance that people have. I mean, to somebody that interacts with somebody that's from 200 or 300 years in the future, those people seem like they're magical beings. And we have done that to ourselves in a way. I mean, some of these things are government projects that have been brought on us. Montauk, the Philadelphia experiment, various different things that have happened. Those things are real, and those are literally energy portals. Very large energy portals and projects that started and have introduced things. They've opened up the ability to travel between different dimensions. And we're reaping the harvest of some of that now.
I just wanted to go back to an earlier point that you made. You said when you have these meetings with the Palladian race, you are working to get a message out to better humanity. Can you just give us some more detail on what that is involved, what you're actually doing to help, or what the plans are to get this message out?
Well, over the years, a long time ago, I had a situation in my living room where I had an opportunity to sit down with 3 different races. And as strange as this sounds, because of all the weird stuff that was happening on the ranch, one night, or actually over a few nights, I sat down and wrote a list of 100 questions I would ask if I ever had the time to sit down and talk to a real bona fide ET from the future, or one that had, advanced knowledge of technology. Because I started saying to myself, I mean, what good is all this if you don't have something that you can actually physically get something out of this? And I said to myself, well, the best information, the best knowledge, the best insights you can get, now that is something that is going to be valuable forever. I mean, some people are like, hey, give me a gold brick or big diamond or something that I can cash in and live off the rest of my life. I wasn't interested in anything like that. I wanted knowledge. I wanted something to be able to cure disease, or to create unlimited power, or to be able to create technology that would allow us to be able to heal people. And so those are the kind of questions I asked. And sure enough, we got the information. We actually had a couple of individuals stay with us here on the ranch for 6 months, and they literally built examples of some of this technology. They built what we call a med bed, and that med bed could cure just about anything there was. They ended up building a generator that was the size of a microwave that could provide enough power to run all of Buckeye, which is the second city largest mass area in Arizona. Most people don't know that. They think it's Phoenix and then Tucson and so on, but it really isn't. Buckeye, from a physical standpoint, is the second largest city in Arizona. So, we've had all sorts of various different things that have been shown to us and taught to us.
So you've had you had this med bed built in your property. Where's that now? Is it still being used? Have you shared that with anybody?
No, when they left, they went back up to Las Vegas, Nevada, and they took it with them. And they actually, it's a very long story, but they started trying to bring out the technology, not just that technology, but a whole bunch of different things all at once. And they, with the idea that they were going to create a bank, financial bank, so that they would have enough money to be able to do kind of the stuff that I want to do. But they tried to do it directly by producing it themselves. And they got in all sorts of trouble and ended up disappearing. I don't know what happened to the technology. It was in a warehouse. I imagine it got confiscated by somebody, but I've had no contact with either of those individuals now in probably 7 or 8 years. I don't even know if they're alive anymore.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that. It's been a real privilege talking to you, John.
Can I do a PR for my book?
Yeah, go ahead.
We have a book out, and it tells all this information and a great deal more. Plus, it puts it in various different contexts. It gives examples. There's evidence in there. There's links to other things that are evidence. It's appropriately called Stardust Ranch, The Incredible True Story, and it is available on Amazon. And if people make a donation to our trust fund here at the ranch to go ahead and put into the trust to do all the good work we want to do, I'll be happy to actually buy a copy of the book and sign it for you and send it to you directly. I should tell you, I actually, as a real person, very few people that are personalities in the paranormal world will actually give you their email so that people can get hold of them and ask questions directly. I treat everybody, just like I'm a regular person. So if anybody wants to reach me, they can reach me at John Edmonds 411@gmail.com from any place in the world, and I will try to answer your questions.
That's amazing. Thank you, John. Thank you so much for your time today. We really do appreciate it, and it's been extremely fascinating to speak to you and listen to the experiences you've had. So all the best, and we'll keep in touch.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, I invite everybody that has a good heart, that's positive, that wants to be part of what we're trying to do, to get hold of me, and let's see what we can put together. And the media and people that are doing shows. We would love to have some people that want to do a movie, so that we could get this out on a bigger scale. It's not about the money. I'm happy to give the money to our charity to feed the animals. All I want to do is get the message out there so that we can, do more good work. That's what this is all about, is good work.
Pursuit of the Paranormal with Ash and Greg.